Okay, I think we'll get started here if folks are ready to roll. My name is Bruce Palmer, and I'm the Director of Admission and Marketing at Knowles. And been at the school for 27 years now, and in my time at Knowles have been involved with a number of media incidents that have occurred over time. And so I wanted to share some of the learnings that we've had at Knowles from the experiences that we've had, plus some of the research that we've done in addition to that. And so that's kind of the basic idea behind the presentation today. So I think I'll just dive right in. Oh, I guess one other thing I did want to mention, in addition to working at Knowles and doing media relations at Knowles, I'm also the vice chair of the Wyoming Democratic Party and do media relations for the state Democratic Party as well. Those of you who might be familiar with Wyoming would know that that's a challenging situation to find yourself in. Just yesterday, I was called a traitor on Facebook. A traitor to the United States of America, Bruce Palmer. So it's my claim to fame. I'm going to wear it proudly. So we're going to jump right in and start talking about crisis communication in the Facebook age. And if you came to this thinking this is going to be really heavy on social media, it's not, because what I really want to focus in on is the fact that basic communication skills still matter. The social media is it's a tool, certainly, that we can be using in our communication, and an important tool that we can be using in our communication, but there's a lot of things that go on behind that. A lot of what we were doing back in 1992 or 1993, before social media was so prevalent, or before Al Gore had invented the internet, we had to do the same things. It's a lot about getting ready and having your ducks in a row and then communicating. And so social media is just one of the channels and ways that we're going to go about doing that. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of a story that we experienced at Knowles. And what I wanted to start out with, just it was July 24th, and it was the year 2011. I was laying in bed. It was a Sunday morning, and about 6 o'clock, the phone rang. And it was a Sunday morning. I was like I was getting ready to go thinking I was going for a bike ride. That was my plan. And so I was laying in bed trying to get psyched up to get out of bed to do the bike ride. The phone rings, and my wife picks it up, and she says it's Don Ford calling from Knowles, Alaska. And so I didn't realize at that particular moment what the next 48 hours were going to present for me and for Knowles. I didn't recognize what the next 3 months would look like for our organization and the amount of scrutiny that we would find ourselves under. I didn't realize that for the next 3 years, this story would keep on popping up and be part of my life as we proceeded along. And so I want to share that and tell you a little bit and use that kind of as the form and format for this presentation about communications. So the plan for the day, as I said, utilizing this story about the bear attack in Alaska on July 23rd, 2011, we're going to talk a little bit about what makes a news story. We're going to talk a little bit about messaging and tactics that we can use as we're dealing with the media. We'll talk about social media specifically. And we'll also talk about the lessons that we learned as we went through this incident. So I guess for starters, I was kind of curious. I wanted to kind of get a sense of who the audience is. So how many of you work in outdoor education? If you could raise your hand. Okay, quite a few. How many work in a travel kind of business? Okay, quite a few travel. Any lawyers? Okay. How about search and rescue? Anybody active in search and rescue? Okay, great. And then the next question I have for you is, how many employees work in your organization? How about 1 to 10? Okay, so relatively small organizations. 11 to 20. Okay, a little bit bigger. 20 to 50. Okay, 100 or more. Okay, so a number of fairly large organizations here as well. And the reason I ask that question is because resources matter when you find yourself well, resources matter across the board, right? But when you find yourself with some sort of a media incident, resources really matter because there's a lot going on in a crisis situation. The media is just one piece of that. And that's the part we're going to be focusing on, but you're also dealing with your field operations, you're dealing with whatever response needs to happen to the incident. You have things going on that are business related outside of this as well, and so you're trying to juggle all these pieces parts. And obviously the more people you have, the more resources you have, it becomes a little bit easier to do all those things, and you can do each of them better. But regardless, you have to do them all, no matter whether it's an organization of 5 or whether it's an organization of 500. So anyways, but we'll try to tailor this as we go along, and I think you should think about it that way, is okay, what does this mean for my organization as we get into this? As we're going along, I would encourage folks to ask questions. Just stop me. If there's something I've said that you want to know more about, or just have a question about it, or you have a comment, something you want to add. I think one of the great things about this conference is the give and take. And so I've had some experiences. I'm going to share those. You may have had some experiences as well, and we can all learn from those. So let's keep this as interactive as we possibly can. So to that thought, what are some of the elements of a great news story? Anybody have any ideas about what makes a great story?
First hook, first line.
Okay, so you got a hook, and what are some of the hooks that you might recognize out there? Okay, so there's this adventure and something terrible happens. Okay, what other kinds of hooks are there that might make a story really go crazy in the media? Say again?
That could have been me or someone I love.
Me or somebody I love? Yep, that's another one that's out there for sure. Any other? Yes?
Including mine, it's something to do with kids being abandoned or not being parentalized.
Young people, exactly. That's another great hook. Other hooks that you can think of? Yeah.
Something scandalous?
Yeah. Yeah. Getting all kinds of that these days. We're scandal rich. Yes. Any other ideas? Yeah.
Something that plays on a common fear.
Yeah, such as? Yeah, wild animals oftentimes are a nice catch. It's the year of the shark or the year of the bear. Things along those lines. Any other thoughts of things that might get a story going and keep it going? Yeah.
Finances, money.
Yeah, okay, money issues, frequently will do that. Anything else you can think of? Yeah.
Somebody's fault and it's due to a character flaw.
Yep, somebody's to blame here. Let's find out who it is. Yep, that certainly does it. How about, something, help isn't immediately available. That's how a story goes on and on. I'll remember, from a young age, the story, it was a young girl fell down this well shaft down in Texas, I think it was. And this story just went on, it went on and on forever. Even after they'd rescued her, it kept on going on because it was just this fascinating story. But it took a long time, and of course everybody's like, why does it take so long? And so that can make a story go along. Heroic acts can make it go along as well. So those are some of the hooks that exist out there that cause a story to become a great news story, or Donald Trump. Either one will make a great news story. So anyway, so we've got all these different hooks. And so what I'm going to do now is show you some video from our incident, our bear incident. And at the end, after we see these, I'll ask you to kind of pick out for me, some of those things that you saw that kind of caused this story to get a little bit bigger than than many might have. And for folks who aren't totally familiar with the bear story, as you go through these little clips, at the last clip that I show is from the Today Show. And it actually kind of walks you through the event as it was understood by NBC News. So, here we go. Is that loud enough? So that kind of gives a sense of the story. And it gives you a sense of what media can look like in an incident like that. Were there any things that kind of people noticed particularly as those were unfolding?
Alaska is a very dangerous place.
It is a very dangerous place. Yes?
Were they on a solo trip without an instructor? Like, did they choose to leave that information out to make it more sensational?
No, there was not an instructor with the group. They were on their small group expedition. It was the 24th day of their course, and so we had student, excuse me, we had student groups. Sorry, technical difficulties. Sorry. Never eat a granola bar right before you do a presentation. Note to self. So anyway, so yes, it was a student expedition, so they were traveling without instructors at the time. Yes. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure one of the news outlets actually used a picture of a black bear.
That would be correct. The media does not know the difference one bear to the next. That would be true.
They kept calling them, or like a couple people called them survival courses.
Mm-hmm.
And I work for Knowles. We're not just like putting people out there to see if they survive.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if you notice, some were survival. There was an outdoor leadership retreat, which sounded so like, I wonder how they ended up out there on their retreat. Yeah, so the facts are not always in alignment around things, is true, yeah.
The journalists put their own perception of fear, and, you know, even like the one lady was shivering, you know, so they were putting their own feelings and perceptions on how horrific this was, whether it was horrific or not, but they already had set the pace that it was going to be just the worst story ever.
Yep, yeah, exactly, yes.
They said that it was 7 hours, as if that was such a long, long time for folks to get there, but depending on where they were, that seems like a pretty, it could have been a really awesome response time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You made a point of it being a mother bear, playing on that. There's another emotion that you brought in about maternal instinct.
Yep. Yeah, and it was never fully confirmed whether there was a cub or there wasn't a cub. You know, so that's still kind of an unknown in the story itself. But anyways, yes, there was that piece.
I'm surprised to see that the only actual reference to Knowles was the kid's hat. Like, none of the media actually got the name right or even tried to.
Yeah, which was I found kind of interesting as we were going along, and I wasn't unhappy about. I wasn't trying to correct anybody on that. Yes, but yeah, that was kind of weird. We thought that was strange all the way through. There were places where our name did definitely show up, but on most of the TV stuff, it did not. In the back.
So, you know, I'm in Alaska, so perceptions, which is part of, you know, what you're talking about here, perception within Alaska was, this is ordinary, this is what happens with people, and the clear perception was they were in the alders where they shouldn't have been. There was no big attachment within the state to, was there a mother bear, was there not a mother bear, there was no attachment to, did they have a teacher, did they not have a teacher. The overall look at that was, that's absolutely ordinary stuff, and they were in the alders.
Yep.
So, you know, different perception than you're gonna generate in the lower 48 is what I'm saying.
Yes. Yep.
The news organizations have managed to get their hands on pictures of the group and also managed to get interviews with them with their scars still visible.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, so kind of, I would say overall the approach was somewhat sensational. It was like Weird Tuesday, or this is crazy, or they were mauled. You know, there's a lot of different words that were out there. And I think all of them pointed toward, this is huge. And that was probably means it was huge compared to anything else that was happening that day. And so that was kind of the way it got played out in the media. And it was a big story and got a lot of play. You know, there were several hundred TV stories that were done on this. This is kind of our clip service and all the different stories that showed up. There were more than 400 written stories that were done on this as well. So it was a big media event. And one of the things to realize about media when this sort of thing happens is there's national media and then there's going to be local media. And so in this particular instance, we had 7 students. They were from all over the country. the Bay Area, so it was covered strongly in the Bay Area. We had a student from Rochester, New York, so we spent a lot of time talking with the Rochester press. And then we had the national media as well, so the CNNs, the Fox Newses, and all that sort of stuff as well. So you're kind of operating in a variety of different areas, and it happened in Alaska, so you have the Alaska media also. So you're working in big media, and you're also working in smaller, more local media. But what it means is it goes everywhere as a result of that. And that's just something you need to kind of have in your mind when you go into it is, first, is this going to be a national story? And then second, how many places are going to be interested in this as a local interest story? And so you need to kind of approach it that way.
Bruce, which of those outlets, local or national, took up most of your time?
As we get into this, I'll get into a little bit more detail, but we ultimately had to kind of start segmenting. I was doing the national stuff, and then we had another spokesperson that we brought in on day 2 who started focusing more on the local. At the start, it's just like, it's triage, it's all coming at you. And so it was just pick up the phone, do an interview, pick up the phone, do an interview, pick up the phone, do an interview. I did over 200 interviews in that 48-hour period afterwards. So it was a little crazy and a little overwhelming. So all right, so we've kind of talked a little bit about like what makes a story, okay? And the bear story definitely was one that had legs. So lions and tigers, bears, those are things that make for stories. And what we want to do when we get into these situations is we want to do our best to try to control the story, make sure it's accurate, the information that's getting out there. And so that's really what our focus on when we're doing media relations is to make sure the story is accurately portrayed. I think frequently, those of us who find ourselves, say working in outdoor education or probably in any business where you come under scrutiny, many people's response is, I don't know why they're doing this to us. Why are they scrutinizing us? But the fact is, the public does have a right to know. And that's the media's job, is to get the story out there and tell the story and report on it. So, one of the things that I always try to do whenever I'm dealing with a reporter or something like that is just kind of put myself in their shoes a little bit and just kind of say, they're just doing their job. This is not a personal thing. It's not to say it never is a personal thing, but generally it's not a personal thing. They're just doing their job to the best of their ability. So anyway, so we're trying to control it and accurately direct it. And so how do we go about doing that? We use at Knowles, and I think probably at most organizations, message points, otherwise known as talking points. And so I'm going to show you a quick little funny video. It's from The Daily Show. And I haven't used this for a few years because it seems so old. This is from 2004. And so it's an old clip. But it's Jon Stewart talking about it's when John Kerry announced his vice presidential candidate, John Edwards, and so just kind of how the political parties tried to control the story, and they used talking points, and so he talks a little bit about that. It seemed like in an election year it was a good time to roll it back out. And now it all seems so sane. 2004 seems so like, wow, run-of-the-mill, average politics. Not so much today.
George Bush has sincere heartland
so a political campaign where we're just talking about liberals. We don't even use that word this year. So anyways, talking points. They're a tool, and obviously Jon Stewart was making kind of fun of talking points, but they are a tool that we can use to keep us on message. So, you know, they're an outline, basically. They help us organize our thoughts. They help us keep us from kind of going over the precipice, off the edge. They're guardrails, keeping us on the road, allowing us to stay on message and deliver the thoughts that we want to get out there. So how do we go about developing message points? We're going to start out essentially with the basic facts, the who, what, where, when, what's being done. Those are important pieces of your message points. We want to think about what sort of story we want to develop around this idea, this event that's going on. And we also want to anticipate what sorts of things will be asked of us as we go on. So we have answers in place for those questions that are going to come up. So, at Knowles, when we sit down, when an incident happens, this is the first version, well, it's actually version 2, and unfortunately it's not that easy to read. But anyways, this is our message points that we developed. I think this was around 11 o'clock on that Sunday morning, so the call came in at 6 o'clock. And so at 11, there's a bunch of us sitting in the office, and we're kind of figuring out, okay, what do we have to say about this particular incident? We have some factual information, group of 7 students hiking without instructors, some information on where they were, what happened, one bear attacked the group, what is happening going forward. The Alaska State Troopers have been contacted. The PLB had gone off, and they're responding to the scene, and then students have been evacuated. There's misinformation in here. It says 3 students have been evacuated by helicopter to Providence Hospital. That's one of the things that you need to realize going into these. Things change. Information is what you think you know, you may not. In this particular instance, 2 of the students were evacuated to Providence. The rest were taken to a local hospital, Matsu Regional Hospital. Some information on their condition as we understood it, things along those lines. So these message points are things that you're going to evolve. Pretty much every few hours you're going to go back into them and say, okay, has anything changed? Is there new information? Was there information that we thought we knew, but it was incorrect information? And getting those things all corrected and making sure that you have it all down. And so that's kind of the process that we use throughout this incident. And we use with others as well. So anyway, so these are things that happen like in the crisis moment. What you need to think about, though, is you don't want to wait till there's a crisis to kind of figure some of this stuff out. And so you want to have a lot of this information already in place. And so, we have our crisis protocol book. And within the crisis protocol book, we have a series of questions that we would anticipate we may be asked. One of them was, were these students traveling without instructors? Why? Why were they traveling without instructors? And so we have message points about why we believe that the student expedition is a critical piece of a Knowles expedition course. What about communication devices? And so we have messages around the communication devices that we use on Knowles courses, whether it's personal location beacons or satellite phones or whatever. As communication devices have gotten better, these messages are a little bit easier to deliver. When I started back in the early 90s, and it was sort of like, we had a radio, but you had to have line of sight and all these sorts of things. So it's much easier now than it used to be because the communication options are certainly better. And so we have those sorts of things, but probably the place to begin is just, first of all, being able to say what your organization does and why it's important. That's going to be the first stop probably for you. And so I thought I'd give you an example. This is what we at Knowles would call our elevator pitch. If somebody walks up to the Knowles table, you'll hear one of our representatives probably say something a lot like this. Knowles is the world's most comprehensive wilderness school. Students of any age learn communication, good judgment, and grit through developing outdoor skills, risk management, and wilderness medicine expertise in a hands-on environment. Students graduate prepared to step forward and lead in their communities. So probably each of your organizations has something like this. You're out there representing your school, your travel company, whatever, and people ask you, what is it you do? The elevator pitch is essentially the idea of what, if you got onto an elevator and you're going 3 floors, what would you tell somebody when they said, well, what do you do? And so that's the elevator pitch. So what I wanted to do was have you guys kind of just quickly turn to your partner and tell them kind of your elevator pitch for your organization. Okay, ding. The elevator just got to the 6th floor. All right, let's come back together. The elevator doors are open. We're getting out. Okay, this is an opportunity to throw your neighbor under the bus now. Was there any particularly awesome elevator pitch anybody heard from your neighbor that maybe they would share with us? Yes.
I feel like my neighbor had a great elevator speech.
Would you like to tell us your elevator speech?
I didn't mean to throw you out.
It's sort of an elevator speech, but I had just written a note, everyone in our organization should know our elevator pitch. If we don't, we all know it. I think the letters would attest to that. I work for C Semester, which is in its 45th year of delivering undergraduate ocean education programs. Students come to our campus in Woods Hole for 6 weeks of preparatory academic study and then go on to one of our 2 sail training and oceanographic research vessels where they conclude their studies. The academics focus in oceanography, nautical science, and seamanship, marine policy, and emerging issues of sustainability in the island cultures and nations that we visit with an eye to growing ocean stewards for the future.
Woo! That was great. Anybody else want to share your elevator pitch? Okay. Here we go.
I work for an organization called P3 Mental Health Advisors. We do crisis management, pre-departure planning, and training for staff who work with students in international education and outdoor education. We support staff to be able to de-escalate, communicate effectively with students, to identify risk factors, and we do ongoing crisis management and incident response when there are escalated issues in the field.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. That's great. So that's kind of the starting spot, right? Okay, you need to understand your organization, be able to explain it to the outside world in a way that's succinct enough that it might actually make it into a news story that's being put out there. Okay. Now comes the hard part. What does your organization teach that is worth the loss of a life? That's the question that you have to be ready for. And we're not going to break up into groups and talk about this. But I think, if I were going to, action items, this is the question you need to be able to answer. If you find yourself in a crisis situation, what do you do that's worth the loss of a limb? What do you do that's worth the loss of a life? These are pretty heartfelt situations. And so we need to be able to articulate that if we find ourselves in this kind of a situation. Okay, so that's kind of sobering, isn't it? So let's continue on. So this is an example of the press release that we did. And so one of the things that you're going to do, kind of your first steps after you get that phone call, you head to the office, you rally your troops, and you do your message points. And then the next thing you do is you develop a press release. So you have some sort of a written statement that you can put out there should the media call. And so you're going to make your press release. It's essentially your message points with a little bit more information in them, and obviously written for outside consumption, because your message points really should just be an outline. They don't even have to be full sentences. They can just be some phrases. They're kind of those cues that are going to help walk you through a telephone interview, a television interview, things along those lines. This is going to be more of a written document that you would hand out. You would put it up on your website, things along those lines. And so that's your next step. I mentioned rallying the troops. And so, obviously, as we started out, there's all kinds of things going on. I'm really focusing in on the media relations side. So this is what my suggested team would be for the media element of this. Then there's obviously all the field elements and everything else that might be going on. You need somebody who's in charge, so director. In Noel's case, I am the director, and so I would handle the decision-making about communications, and I have traditionally filled the primary spokesperson role for Noel's. One of the things that we learned in this particular incident is sometimes having one spokesperson is not enough. The volume of interviews in this particular case was such that we brought in multiple people. We didn't figure that out until like day 1.5, which was a little late in the game. So we have this now written up that we will find these people and get them ready. You need writers because there's so much going on to get that press release done. If there's any other statements that need to be written, things along those lines. So you need people that can do that. One of the things that we found, again, the volume was such that when it started out, I was picking up the phone and doing an interview, and then I was picking up the phone and doing an interview, and pretty soon it was like there were 50 phone calls out there that I couldn't get to. And so we assigned one person to be kind of the booking agent, if you will. And so all the calls went to her, and then she kind of racked them up. And so she would take down who the person was, what the media was, what their deadline was, because every outlet probably has a different deadline. And so with that information, we were able to say, okay, well, we need to get this one first because they go to press at 10, and this one doesn't go to press till 11. So we got them in line around what their needs were for their deadlines and things like that. You also want, go ahead.
Did you do any vetting of the people that were calling and asking for interviews as well?
Yes. Yeah, and to be honest, we didn't get any like nutty sort of ones. They were all legit, but yeah, she was going through and like, who is this, and kind of getting a sense of what it was they wanted.
That would be really challenging nowadays with so many quote media outlets online.
Yes, yeah, and even then, this is 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. I mean, there was tons. They were coming out of the woodwork, and you had blogs, and you had standard newspapers, and you had TV and radio and this, that, and the other thing. So yeah, there's just more and more media outlets that are out there. Yeah.
What was the first point of communication that began this process of bringing all this media pursuit of you?
Okay, actually, that's a great question. It's kind of one of those, 6 o'clock, the call comes in. 8 o'clock, we've got a small team assembled. And of course, then there's no information. And so, we're sitting down, we're writing what we do know, we're starting to make notes, we're keeping track of a few things, little bits of information come in here and there. By about noontime, there's still like no media, but we've now got a press release kind of hammered out. We've got our message points, and and then and through that we're having conversations of should we put the press release out, or do we hold the press release? And we decided at that point we're going to hold it because if we have more information, we can do a better job. And so the longer we can go without having to say anything, the better the information is going to be that we can put forward. So we kept on just kind of hanging tight on the whole thing. And then it was about 3 o'clock, I think, finally, the Alaska State Troopers put out a press release. And so then it went. And in the press release, they did include the names of the injured, which was, from my perspective, great, because we always find ourselves in the quandary of should we be releasing names, and thankfully, in this case, the state troopers released the names, so we didn't have to worry about that. That was out there, so then we could start talking about them by name and things along those lines. So that helped. That would have been nice. I'd been trying to get in touch with the communication. Of course, it's Sunday, right? These things happen in the middle of the night or they happen on the weekends. And so it was a Sunday, and I could never actually establish communication with the communications department at the state troopers. And so, no. What basically happened was we just kept looking at their website, seeing if there was anything there, and eventually we saw it about 30 seconds before the phone rang. So that's how it actually got out there. And then it just sort of built out from there. It was kind of some local media at the start, but once the CBS affiliate in Anchorage has it, and it looks kind of juicy and interesting, then CBS in New York City has it, and then it just kind of runs. Yes?
Did the parents or guardians, were they notified first of the injuries before the
Yes, they were. And when we go through lessons learned, we can get into this a little bit more, but there's this dance that you're doing throughout the whole thing. Again, I was talking about you want to have the best information possible before you really start talking about it. You don't want to be beat to the punch and have somebody hear about it on the news. Things along those lines. So in this particular instance, in terms of family communication, we started with the families of the students that were injured. Then we went to the families of the other students that were in the group. If you recall from the Today Show, 4 were injured, 3 were not. So we went for the 4 first, then we went for the 3 second. And then we were kind of in a quandary as to what to do at that point in terms of family. There were 2 sections of this course that started on the same day. And so we decided, okay, and the group was bigger. So we then reached out to the entire rest of the course. This was just one group of 7 out of a group of 15. So then we reached out to the parents of the others. Then there was what we would characterize at Knowles as a sister section. So then we reached out to the sister section, and then we kind of stopped at that point, and that was a mistake. We should have notified everybody who had somebody in Alaska, but we didn't, that was an error. And so we won't make that mistake again. We'll do better next time, but that was a learning moment. Yes?
When we had a bear attack, it was actually Knowles' attack, but Outward Bound reported it, so we dealt with a lot of media. We had to contact all our Outward Bound clients in every single state in the USA.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it wasn't ours, Outward Bound had been called in, so the sheriff department had said it was Outward Bound. And so we were having people cancel courses in everywhere else, and it wasn't ours.
Yeah, these things, yeah, it's like nobody knows. It's like Outward Bound, Knowles, SCA. Who is this? I don't know. There was a bear attack, and so like it does cause this ripple that goes throughout the entire industry when that happens. Yeah, Tracy.
So, I'm finding something interesting when I'm listening to you. If we step back a couple seconds, we were talking about using this booker and how much information you give to the media, and then you were trying to line up, okay, they go to press first, and so we need to get to them first. And when you talk about it, it sounds like such a collaborative relationship with media. And in my chair, it is never a cooperative relationship. It's almost something to be avoided. So can you address for us your feelings or theories about, which is obviously different than the contentious relationship that comes with my chair? I'm just finding that interesting. You're so
Yeah.
willing to engage.
Yes. Yeah, so I think, Knowles has had the philosophy of it's better to engage than to not engage. And so that's been the way we have approached it. Now, there does reach a point where engagement is not helpful. And that's probably when an attorney is involved. This is early on in the incident. I think 6 months later it might have turned differently. It did not, but we try to prevent a legal environment basically, and so we are looking at when we're messaging, we're making sure we're not saying anything that is later on going to be a problem for us legally. So there's certainly that element of it. But we have, through our history, in the time I've been at the school, we have been very cooperative with the media and worked with them that way.
So when you're doing your talking points and you're developing information as it comes along, I think that's critical what you said, that you have that contact with family before it gets media. But when you're doing all of that development, do you involve counsel?
Okay, we typically have not, we have somebody that coordinates legal stuff for us, Scott Robertson, who I think is here. I haven't seen him yet, but he's around the conference someplace. And anyways, Scott was an attorney, was not a practicing attorney. He is our connection with our legal folks. So yes, Scott is typically involved with those conversations as we're developing the message points. Drew Lehman, who is our risk management director, is involved with those as we're developing the message points. So it's not just the communications staff that are doing that. We're reaching into a lot of different areas. And as we're developing those, we're kind of, we are looking at it and going along saying, like, were we following our accepted field practices or weren't we? Things along those lines. So I think we're always looking at it with an eye toward, what could in the future be coming down the pike. But I would say we do typically err on the side of we need to be cooperative with the media, and that pays dividends as we go along. Yes?
Did you find once the names had come out that the families were contacted directly by the media, and did you do anything to try and support or control that situation?
Yeah, as best as we could. It's really hard to do. And so, for the students that were injured most grievously, we made arrangements for their families to fly to Alaska, and so we met them at the airport, we picked them up, we had them at the hospital, things along those lines. So yes, so we were staying in very close touch with them, and through that, had some level of control over what was happening with media because we were right with them. But in terms of some of the other families, though, it was a little, it was more difficult. Like, families in Rochester. You have no control over them. Yes?
And I know a lot of us tend, or try to do this, but we plan to do it. We try to get a situation training put in place for us to, like, how do you evacuate somebody? If a crisis happens in the backcountry, what happens? Do you and your team do, like, an annual training scenario in this, so you're all working, so
Yeah.
it's not becoming that contentious thing, like everybody able to react as a team when something, because, hopefully this doesn't come up each year or very few times. So you start, even the best of us can get really rusty at this.
Yep. Yeah, we do ongoing training. And so Drew runs kind of overarching risk management training and crisis training. I do crisis communication workshops. And one of the things that's kind of an outcome of this was, I said spokespeople, writers. We're doing a lot of talent identification. So like a couple times a year, I'll do a crisis communication workshop. We'll invite in a variety of different people. They're getting some training that's valuable to them just in terms of day-to-day communication. And at the same time, we're kind of going like, ooh, she's really good at this. And so, frequently folks who are in that training go like, I don't want to be very good at this because I don't want to do that job. But anyways, so we're constantly trying to find folks, and we're constantly training to be the best prepared that we can be. Absolutely. Yes.
I want to speak a little bit to the communication and with regard to PLBs and sat phones, depending on what you pick. Some PLBs can go through a local sheriff's office, in which case you'll maybe lose that communication quicker, whereas sat phones will have that direct line with the field and you'll be able to maintain that flow better. So just in choosing those devices, you can have more control.
Absolutely. Okay, so we need to motor along here. So that was the team. To prepare for the interview, these are some things that you want to keep in mind. Obviously, in this crisis situation, when they call, we know what the purpose of the interview is. They're following up on a bad incident. You want to give some thought to location of where you might do an interview. Obviously, if it's a phone interview with a newspaper, that's pretty straightforward. You can do that anywhere. But frequently, TV, they want to come. And you want to probably give some thought to where on your campus might you do an interview. Probably don't want to do it in front of your logo. Things along those lines. What would be the backdrop you'd want behind you while you were carrying on this conversation? You want to think about the medium and the publication. Frequently that'll give you some clues about what level of knowledge they might have. If you're talking with somebody from Outside Magazine or you're talking with somebody from the New York Times, their level of understanding might be very different. In a crisis, you don't really have time to do this research, but oftentimes you can look up an interview, the person, it's going to be Joe Blow. They're doing the interview. And I know that they know about this because they've written about this before. And so you can kind of tailor your message that way. Who's the audience that you're going to be communicating with through that medium? How might recent events affect the interview? In this particular instance, there was a bear attack before ours, then ours happened, and then there was a polar bear attack afterwards, and I kept on going, God, that organization is dealing with a polar bear attack. That must really suck because there's all these bears out there now. And so that's going to affect how the interview is going to go. And then what are they likely to ask? Give some thought to that before you actually get into the interview. So I want to go through just some basic tactics, strategies, techniques that you can use when you're in an interview, okay? So the first of those is something that is called bridging. And essentially bridging is moving from what the question is to what your message points are. And so some ways to do that would be, I don't know the answer to that question, but what I do know, and then go to your message points. Or what's frequently happening, I would say the most common thing that happens in an interview is they're going to ask you, how could that possibly have happened? And so they're asking you to speculate. And so, the most common bridge that I've used in these situations is, that would require speculation, but what I do know is, and then you can go into some of your facts of what happened or other messages that you might want to do. Sometimes they'll ask you a question in a way that the answer is no. No, let me explain, or yes, and furthermore. And so, again, you're bridging to the messages that you develop, the things you want to deliver to that person, that media. Flagging is another one of the techniques that communications folks use. And flagging is essentially placing a flag on that most important point that you want them to take away. The most important thing to realize about this incident is, and so you go into it. And then we talked actually before about hooking. And so that's what you're trying not to do when you're doing an interview in a critical incident. And so that's something to steer clear of. Don't like throw something out there that just leaves it hanging. There's some really interesting things about this incident. Really? What would those be, Bruce? And so you don't want to do that. That's a bad thing. Okay. That's terrible. Never mind. Let's just skip that. That's the AP story that they did on the bear, and I was going to kind of show you some of the message points and stuff like that in there, but you can't see them, so it's not really worth doing. So what I'm going to do now is I have another video clip I'm going to show, and this is an interview that I did with Megyn Kelly, the famous Megyn Kelly. She wasn't quite as famous back then. Anyways, this is a bear interview that I did with her, and it was on the was it Monday? It was Tuesday. It was the Tuesday after the attack. So we'd kind of moved through. The kids were okay. There's two of them were still in the hospital, but they were healing up, and things were progressing in a positive sort of a way. And Fox News called. They wanted to do a live Skype interview. And so, we, being the cooperative people that we are, said yes, we would do that. And interestingly, the way they did this was I did a pre-interview. So I had like one of the production people do an interview with me, and it was brutal. It was really hard. And there were legal questions and all these sorts of things that I was constantly like working my way around, these little landmine sorts of things. So I was like, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. And then it turned out it wasn't that bad. But anyways, I'm going to show you this, and I guess what I would encourage you to do, and I show it to you not because I did it great, because I didn't. I got through it. It was over when it was done. But anyways, what I encourage you to look for is just like, what do you think the message points were that I was trying to get across? And any other interesting things that you might see, and then we can kind of dissect this a little bit. Big bear.
We came upon the bear as we walked around, basically like a little rock outcropping, and the bear began to attack. I believe we startled the bear, and so when grizzly bears are startled, they attack. And we also believe that the bear was a mother, and there was a cub present as well. So the bear was acting in defense of its cub.
What a story. So we're joined now by Bruce Palmer, who's a spokesperson for the National Leadership School. He runs the Wilderness Adventure Program. Good to talk to you today, Bruce. Welcome. This must have shaken you all up when you got word of this.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's the worst possible thing that you could imagine. So we here at Knowles, the National Leadership School, we're pleased to see how quickly the Alaska State Troopers were able to step in and get a helicopter in the air and moving toward these students to support them and get them out of the field. And so, yeah, absolutely, that kind of work, it gets your attention really quickly.
I can imagine, because you guys have been leading outstanding programs for many, many years for students across this country. So this must have been, a real kick in the gut when you got that phone call. Speaking of kicks, one of the boys that we heard from a little while ago, he said, I just kicked him in the face, this bear, and, basically KO'd him, and that's the way we do things where I come from. Is that what you trained them to do?
In terms of our bear protocols, what we encourage everybody who's traveling in bear country to do is travel in a large group. In this particular instance, there were 7 students in the group. We would say that you should be making noise, yelling "Hey bear" from time to time, letting the bears know that you might be in the vicinity to move them away, scare them off so you don't startle them.
Wait, did you say you're supposed to yell, hey bear?
Yes. They were crossing a stream, could be the sound of the
So there you have it. Is there anything you saw that kind of caught your eye in terms of messages or anything along those lines?
That you had their policies and protocols that those kids had been taught.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that was definitely a message.
I think turning the attention to what people did really well. So the Alaska State Troopers or the students handled things really well, and they're the ones who we should be talking about for doing such a good job.
Yeah, that was kind of the thank God piece of this whole thing, at least from media relations, and I think all the way across the board. But at least from my perspective, as the guy doing the interviews, like, it turned out okay. I mean, everybody's going to be okay. And there was also this element of they really did a great job as well, which made things a little bit simpler once we found out what a great job they had done.
I always like I thought you handled it very well. Every time you kind of like bait you with something else to stay on message, because I think that's something that any of us can fall into pitfalls with, any journalist, where just when you let your guard down, you're like, oh, this is going great. I'm answering all the questions, and then all of a sudden it's like, so we have one of them saying, or
Yeah.
just one last question, and it catches you off guard, and it's hard to stay on topic. And I thought you did a really great job on staying on topic, because it's a tactic that journalists will use when you're ready for it.
Yeah. There was a hook. Did anybody notice the hook I did by mistake? The hay bear? That was, as soon as I said that, I was like, oh no, I'm screwed. That was sort of a bummer. But anyways, so in terms of messages, the response of the Alaska State Troopers was something we want to get out there. When you find yourself in these situations, if you can make it seem like it's just not Knowles against the world, that there's a whole bunch of people that are working on this situation, that's a benefit. So that was one of the things we were trying to get out there. We did want to make it, make sure folks knew that this wasn't just some fly-by-night, it's a bunch of kids set loose out in the backcountry, that there was training that they'd had, and that there were protocols around these things that obviously in this particular case didn't work out as well as we would hope, but that there was training that was involved behind all that. And we were at that point definitely bridging toward this. These young men did a fantastic job of taking care of one another. I also managed to get the word comrade onto Fox News. Not at all my intent, but that's just what came out of my mouth. So anyways, it was worked out pretty well all the way around. So anyways, so that was that. So now I want to get into some of the social media aspects of this. Why don't you raise your hand if your organization does not have a Facebook page? Okay, okay. We got one. All right. How about if your organization does not have a Twitter account? So we got a few without Twitter. Okay. Because that's one of those things that a few years ago, like 5 years ago, when I asked that question, probably the majority did not have social media attached to their organization, and so that's definitely a change that's going on, and so that's something to consider. And this definitely changes the game because we actually have publishing venues now that are in our control, and so we don't have to be totally reliant upon the media as we move through an incident like this. So at Knowles, we have the Knowles blog, and so there was some learning around the Knowles blog during this incident. We did 2 posts basically. We did a press release piece that we put in our press room on our website, and then we were doing a blog entry. And this is one of the things that has actually changed over time. It used to be really hard to be able to put a press release up on our website, and so the blog was definitely the mechanism to be able to add new information, to do updates and things like that. As we're going forward, we probably would not put an incident onto the blog. We'd totally just use our press room for this kind of communication. We also have our Facebook page as well. And so what we were doing in this particular incident was we would put information up on our blog, and then we would Facebook it so folks would know that there was new information that was available that they could go and check out. So this is an opportunity for having some sort of dialogue, which in an incident maybe isn't always the best, There were definitely some haters out there that were attacking us on our own Facebook page as well. We used Twitter during this as well. There were people attacking us on Twitter, and there were also people supporting. So you were getting kind of both of those things that were going on. And then other websites have their own comment areas as well. So, in CNN, I think there were over 1,000 comments on this. Some of it was like, "You are idiots." Some of it was, "No, what you should have is not bear spray, but you need a sawed-off shotgun with, you need to have buckshot, then a slug, then another buckshot." So there was all sorts of advice being given to us as well. This incident showed up on all kinds of different blogs. This is like a parenting blog, and this was kind of a positive, like letting your kid go. And even though sometimes things don't happen the way you would hope they would, it's still good experiences. This is a lawyer's blog, using our bear incident as a way to try to get some customers in the door. This is kind of your Jewish news. Police will not kill bear that attack Jews. That was kind of a weird one that we came across. This is traffic on the Knowles website. That's Bear Day, 2011. And so, definitely it was causing a lot of things to happen in the media and in our media as well. Oops. It was also kind of interesting to see we had a lot of catalog requests that day too. Catalog requests went up, people contacting us went up, so it was sort of a weird backwards sort of a thing. But anyways, I thought I'd run through some of the steps that we took and let you know about that. One of the things we learned was you got to switch off. If you have an automated attendant on your phone, people calling in a crisis situation don't want to get into a tree of messages and things like that. They want to talk to somebody. So turn off that. We did a press release. We did a blog. We used message points. We contacted the parents of the students affected. We did lots of interviews. We monitored media, blog, social networks. We conducted a press conference. That's the first press conference Knowles has ever done. In several of these video pieces that you've seen, there was the boys sitting on a couch talking, and so that was something that we arranged. As we got into Monday, like by about noontime, it was sort of like, nobody wants to talk to me. They want to talk to somebody who is actually there. And so we spoke with the students, asked them if they were interested in doing some sort of a, talk to the media event. We spoke to their parents to see what their parents thought about all that. And so we came to the conclusion that the best way to do that would be a press conference with 4 of the boys. And so we made arrangements with the media and sent out an invitation that they could come to our location in Alaska, had the boys available. They each made kind of a short statement. They answered questions. We did some prep with them. And I wanted to be careful that we weren't like over prepping them. So we did like a video conference call with the boys that were going to do the interview, and mostly just kind of told them, you need to, first of all, you don't have to do it. Second of all, if you get cold feet at the last minute, you don't have to do it. We'll tell them to go home. And then the third thing was just like give some thought in advance to what you might want to say. Think about what happened. Think about how you felt. Think about what your friends did. Things along those lines. So just kind of gave them some ideas of direction that they might want to go with this. And it went really well. And there were two things I would advise. Well, no, one thing I would advise, and then one thing that helped it go well. The thing I would advise was, it's not up here, it's in the next slide. But we ended up contacting a media firm, a PR firm. And we'd had a relationship with them in the past. They'd done a little media relations campaign for us. And so we knew them, and we knew they did crisis communications. And so that day we contacted them and said, we've never done a press conference, and we don't know how to do one. Can you help us? And like within 2 hours, they had kind of put together an outline of what should happen, how we should do it, what sorts of questions we should be expecting, and all that sort of stuff. And they were a savior, because I think it would have gotten kind of messy had we just done it all on our own. So that's one piece of advice I would give. And actually, there is a second piece of advice I would give. We had intended to videotape the press conference. We thought it would be good for after-action reporting. We thought it might be helpful for legal purposes. We're also cheap, and so we arranged for somebody at the Knowles, Alaska location to videotape it, and they got really busy and they forgot. And so we didn't get it videotaped. So we should have spent money. We should have called a video company in Anchorage and hired them to come up and videotape the dadgone thing. There was so much learning that could have happened from that. That was not available to us as a result. But anyway, so that's something you should do. And then the other thing that made this go really well is moms. There was a mom of one of the students, and the first question was a little edgy, and boy, she jumped down the reporter's throat, and everything was smooth after that. It was pretty awesome. She jumped down my throat a few times too, but she jumped down that reporter's throat, and we were golden from there on in. So anyway, so here's some things that we learned from this incident. 24/7 phone coverage. You know, it was a Sunday night. It got to be about 10 o'clock. We felt like we'd really done everything we could do. We sent people home. You know, we set up the phone saying that we'll be back at 6 a.m., and that's not good. You got to have 24/7 phone coverage during these things. It's just a must. We need to announce the coverage that is available. So if you're not doing 24/7, there needs to be something that's very obvious telling them when they're going to be able to call you. Get more people in quickly. It was a Sunday. I was kind of like, I hate to bother anybody before I have to. And then by the time I did contact folks, things were out of control already. And so you want to get as many people in as possible, as early as possible, even if everybody's just sitting around eating donuts, which would have been what we would have been done if I'd got them in when I should have. It still would have been better off. Separate the booking function. We talked about that. Maintain and update a spokesperson list, so to that idea of regular training and then keeping track of who the people are who have some talent in this area. Maintain and update a writers list. Not everybody, even though we've all probably in this room, probably most everybody's graduated from college, not everybody can write well. And so just recognize that and find those people who can do that. This was a big aha moment. Knowles' executive director is at the scene. Our executive director, John Gans, went to Alaska, met the families, was with the families, and when we got the PR firm involved, finally they said to me, "Where is John Gans in all this?" And I was like, "Oh, well, he's with the family." He's like, "Would you tell somebody? Would you tell them that you care so much that your executive director flew to Alaska and is with the family?" It's like, "Oh, yeah, that's probably a good idea, good message point." So anyways, that's something you want to get out there, is that everybody's taking this seriously. The other thing, to kind of walk back to that Fox News thing, I'd kind of forgotten this little bit of information, but one of the things I think you want to do when you're communicating with the media, for sure, you've got to be empathetic. And you really got to, anytime you're talking with the media in these situations, you got to think about what would Josh's parents think if they saw this. And I think you just have to have that in the back of your mind the whole time. And I don't know if you noticed at the very end of that, I usually try with my messaging to start with our thoughts and prayers, or with the persons who are injured. She kind of threw me off by, first of all, screwing up the name of our organization, and then we went down a rabbit hole several times. And thankfully, I was still able to get that in at the back end of that. But the interesting thing was, and the reason I thought of this when I mentioned John was literally in the breakfast room with Josh Berg's family, one of the students, the most badly injured of the students. They were in the breakfast room, Fox News was up on the TV, and they watched that interview together. And they didn't say anything, which John viewed as being a very positive thing, that they didn't freak out by anything that was said or anything along those lines. So people are going to be watching, and they're going to make conclusions based upon the way you respond to things. And some of it's nonverbal, some of it's verbal, but across the board. So just keeping that in mind. Knowing what all your account passwords are. Seems like a simple thing, but we have multiple accounts. At Knowles, for Facebook, we have our general Facebook account. We have a Wilderness Medicine Facebook account. We have a Facebook alumni account. Each of our locations has a Facebook account. And so there's all these accounts out there, and you need to know how to get into all of them in a crisis situation. Contact a PR firm in case you need a consult. And that would be something I would definitely do differently. Sunday morning, soon after I got to the office, I should have called them up, given them the background, and said, we may not need you, but if we do, we just want you to know that there's something going on, and where are you going to be this afternoon if we do. Video of the press conference. And one of the things that we did was we stopped using comments on our blog. And we did that across the board. We were just sort of like, no more comments. So those are things that we did. Some of our current thinking is that email or call parents on all Alaska courses was something we should have done, but we didn't do. And possibly every course everywhere, which during the summertime is pretty substantial, but it probably would have been a good thing to have done. Put our statement in the press room, not on the blog. That's a change that we would definitely make. Definitely post to Twitter, probably post to Facebook. Little unsure about that. Twitter is more of a news feed, and Facebook is a little bit more, the social side of things. So we'd need to make a decision about that, but we would definitely do Twitter. And we wouldn't do things like our Instagram accounts and all these other things. We would just focus on these two in a situation like this. A link from the homepage to the press release. It was kind of hard to find your way to the information during the incident, and so that's something that needs to be done better. Assume centralized control over all social accounts. That's something we didn't do, and it wasn't a problem for us, but it just seems like good practice. As I mentioned, we have all these different Facebook accounts, and we should not have interns in Alaska posting. It all needs to be done by professionals, and so we would pull all those things in a situation like that. Don't allow Facebook to turn into a place to discuss the incident. We allowed comments and just sort of let it run wild. Our current thought is we would probably just hide those comments or delete comments as they were coming in and just use it purely as an outgoing source of information versus conversational. Sweep social accounts of students on the affected course. We don't allow students to carry devices into the field, and we suspect strongly that many of them do. And so, just taking a quick scan of all the things that might be out there is something that should be on our radar screen. It should be on your radar screen. In addition to the media contact, include the email of a person to contact with concerns. So I mentioned not allowing comments on the Facebook page or taking comments off the Facebook page, but providing an email where if you want to talk about this, we'll talk about it. We're not trying to hide anything. We're just not doing it here. There's students involved. And I think that needs to be the refrain is this is out of respect for our students and our staff. We're just not going to do this in public. And so, but if you want to contact me, go ahead. So providing that email contact. Remind staff not to post opinions or condolences on their own personal accounts is something that should be done. And then this is kind of a new thing, and this has been on the forefront of our mind. This past year there's been lots of weird stuff happen, right? Shootings in Orlando, terrorist attacks in Paris, and every single time one of those happens, we go through this big convulsion of, should we do anything about, what should we do about this? And so I've been talking with some social media experts about this, and the conclusion I'm coming to is we should not be inserting NOLS into non-NOLS events. It's horrible what happened in Orlando. We did make a comment on our Facebook page, but retrospectively, I believe we should have just stayed out of it. And shut down for a while out of respect, like not do our promotional posts on Facebook as we normally would, but just stay out of it, go low for a little while, and then come back up later on. And also then provide resources for staff, because staff get, after Orlando, we had a whole series of staff coming in wanting us to do something. And we finally did do something on Facebook, and I think a better way of going about that, and advice that I've been getting lately is that the better way to go would have been provide them resources. Say, you know what, there's 3 organizations that if you wanted to donate to, or you want to write a letter, or whatever, that's probably the better way to go about doing it. So that's some thoughts on that. And then I got a new term the other day, a vague post. No vague posting. Encourage staff to not do it sure has been weird here at Knowles lately. And this was on that Friday night after the tapes came out. So no vague posting. That seems like it's a bad idea. And then you got to recognize that these things have a life. I mentioned at the start that it was like the 48 hours, the 3 months, the 3 years. A big incident like this goes on for quite a while, and you just got to be ready for that and accept that that's going to be the way it is. Dead or Alive. Knowles was on Dead or Alive with the bear incident. We were in Reader's Digest. Grizzly. This is the Dead or Alive. It looks just like it happened. So anyways, it goes on, and I think, Tracy, to your point, is like you can either participate or not. And in this particular incident, we helped them a bit to try to get the facts as straight as we possibly could get them. And then we were kind of like, okay, it's sort of your thing, and we can't participate. Okay. Oops, actually. So the last thing I wanted to mention is monitoring. You want to keep track of what's going on in social media, and so there's tools out there to do so. And one of those would be Google Alerts. Set up a Google Alert with your organization name in it, with the name of, names of people that might end up in the news, whatever. If an incident happens, put a Google Alert on bears. That's how I know that there was a polar bear attack and there was this attack and that attack was, we were just tracking that in the news to see what was going on out there and to see where Knowles was turning up in those stories perhaps. There's some social media tools. There's Sprout Social, there's Hootsuite, things along those lines. So you just want to be tracking, put in keywords that'll then turn back out to you what's going on out in the media. So that monitoring piece is really important. And it's important for a number of reasons. Number one, you do want to have record of what is said out there. That's going to be important. The other thing is we also we adjust our messaging as we're going along. And so like if I see where it's like, oh, I said that, I can't necessarily fix it because it's out there, but I can fix it the next time. And so you want to keep track of that. The other thing we do typically is like the first couple of interviews after an incident, I'll have somebody sit in with me if I'm doing an interview, and so they can tell me, oh, you kind of muffed it here, or maybe if you said it that way, it would have been more effective, or whatever. So you get some instantaneous feedback, which allows you to get things honed down, so you're doing a better job as you're reaching out there. So I want to give you a couple action items, things that you could work on when you go home. One would be identify 3 questions that you would likely be asked in the event of a crisis. And so along those lines, in your crisis protocol, have those 3 questions. Have the message points around those questions so you're prepared for the ones that are kind of the obvious things that are going to come up. You want to be sure to have your organizational and crisis message points unique to your organization. So, anything that's unique about Knowles or about Outward Bound or whatever your organization happens to be, get those things crafted in advance because, there's no point in having to do that in the midst of it. And then practice 2 new methods of monitoring social media. I mentioned a few of them. Do a little bit of research, get accounts set up, and then get after it. And so that's most of the information I wanted to pass off to you. And I wanted to leave you with kind of this thought of, this is not rocket science, because if it were, I couldn't do it. It's a lot of common sense. A lot of it's about empathy and trying to understand how people might perceive you when you put yourself out there. It's about perspective. I think we can all get caught up in our press clippings once in a while, and you started kind of go, oh, we're pretty damn cool. What we do, we change lives, and you can start believing that. And then when something happens, if you've been portraying yourself in that way, if you're always putting your safety record out there as the reason you're so cool, it's going to bite you someday. And so don't believe everything you read about yourself. Grab a little bit of humility and understand that you're not as hot as you think you are, probably. And then I think give some thought to truly how essential is what you do to society, because that's going to be the microscope that we're all going to be under when a bad thing happens. It's like, what is so important that you're doing? Are those leadership outcomes that you get at Knowles, are they so important that young man was killed? It's a hard question to answer. So we just need to think about that. Be mindful of words. Words really do matter, and choosing the right ones make a huge difference in any sort of communication. And then you just got to do it. It is scary as hell. When you go out there and put yourself on television or do an interview or something like that. It can be terrifying. And you just got to take a deep breath and get in there and do it the very best you can. Remain humble, be empathetic, and do your job. That's all I got.